These are the tales from South Florida for you, with your host, Bill Monty.
Welcome, everyone, to another exciting episode. We're doing another holiday episode here as we get ready for the holiday season in South Florida. And I'm so happy that you're joining me for this episode. Now, in the last one, we talked a lot about how the holidays are celebrated in yesteryear down here in South Florida. We talked about the boat parade and driving around looking at the neighborhoods. And I still want to encourage you to please go to the website, Talesfromsouthflorida.com, go to that green banner, click on it, and leave me your memories of growing up in South Florida around the holidays, what you used to do as a kid, what you've done with your family, just so we can share it on an upcoming episode. Hey, you could be a podcast star like me. I want to elaborate a little bit on something that I talked about in the last episode, which was when I was a boy, we used to go up to Little Rock to visit my grandmother's every Christmas. So I didn't get to experience a lot from like the age of 8 to being a young teenager, a lot of Christmases down here. It was always that trip up. But those were very special trips. And I remember, going past the point where my father pointed out that's where they're going to build Disney World, or stopping at a special restaurant each time, or the people that we saw up in Little Rock. They were all part of my growing up in South Florida, even though this part of it was actually in Little Rock. I did an episode about this on my other podcast, Bill Monty's Guide for Getting Older, last year. And so for this episode, what I'd like to do is just go ahead and replay that holiday part of that episode for you, detailing what my memory of those trips were. And I hope you'll enjoy it. So without further ado, from an episode of Bill Monty's Guide for Getting Older, but hopefully for all the new listeners to Tales from South Florida, it's brand new for you, let's take a trip back to about 1968 and some of the years that followed after that. We pack everything up into the car. We're going to celebrate Christmas, not in South Florida, but in Little Rock. When you grow up in South Florida, you don't have the cold weather, you don't have the snow, you don't have the change of seasons. We moved here when I was a young boy, and every Christmas we would go to see my grandmother's in Arkansas, in Little Rock. Those were magical trips, even back then. Even though I was, a young boy, I think 9 years old when we first did it, but that was up through my teenage years. We went there every Christmas and every summer. We were a small family. Both of my grandfathers passed away before I was born. It was my mother, my father, me, my brother, and my 2 grandmothers, plus distant relatives on my father's side that also lived in the area. I remember one time driving up. We were outside, we were on the turnpike, and we were outside of a town called, we didn't know how to pronounce it really. Kissimmee was the best we could do. And my father turned to us and pointed out the window to the right and said, "Boys, that's where Walt Disney's going to build his new Disneyland." I was amazed. And I looked out on this vast swampland, really, and tried to imagine what that would be like. It would be several years before that would open. But my father did make sure that the first spring Disney World was open, we were there. We were teenagers by that time now. The drives up were always magical. As we drove further north, always a few days before Christmas, maybe a week before Christmas, the weather would get colder. We'd start bundling up a little bit more. We didn't have a lot of money, so my mother, for the first day at least, would pack sandwiches and meals. And we'd stop at, I don't know if you remember these, they were called wayside stations back then. They were basically picnic tables on the side of the highway. And we'd pull over to one, and we'd open up the ice chest and pull out the ham and cheese sandwiches and the potato chips and the potato salad and coleslaw. And it was just as grand as the Thanksgiving dinner. Imagine being 8 years old and you're sitting on the side of the highway, the truck's rolling by. My brother and I, after we ate, we'd run to the side of the road. How dangerous was that? And we'd start putting our hands up and pulling them down, and the truckers would honk their horns as they went by. We'd drive up through Georgia, through Atlanta. We'd hang a left somewhere around there. Would take us through Tennessee. We always stopped for a while at a place called Granny's or Grandma's. It was outside of Knoxville. Had great food. And then we'd arrive at my grandmother's house, my father's mother. And you'd walk in. It was always, gas appliances, gas stoves. The smell was very unique. You'd always walk into the smell of a pie cooking. Maybe the Christmas tree would be up, maybe it wouldn't. And the joy would start right then. It was all quite magical for us. So for many years, and I wasn't here in South Florida celebrating with my friends the holidays. We were celebrating with the small family that we had. And of course, back then, if you were a young boy, the best you could hope for presents was, the stockings were full of socks and underwear. But you'd get the G.I. Joe, you'd get the Hot Wheels. Man, we loved Hot Wheels. We'd build the tracks. I think the one gift I always wanted that we never got, in September, the Sears Roebuck catalog would arrive. My brother and I would tear through it, looking at it. And there was always that tabletop pinball game, electric pinball game. I didn't get that until after I got married, actually. My father was right. Quit playing with it after about the first week. So I guess he was good not to buy it, but always hoped that would be in there. But it wasn't about that looking back on it. It was about the family. It was about the fact that my maternal grandmother always had this one bowl. I have it now. I still have it. Carnival glass type of bowl. But it was filled with the old Brock's kind of chalky mints, the kind you would see in restaurants back then as you paid your bill. And she always had the chocolate-covered cherries out for us. She had a sadder life, so her house wasn't as filled with joy sometimes. But it was all mystical and wonderful, and I miss it now more than I ever thought possible. Not just the youth, but the embracing the time as it was. I know we hear this all the time, and as older people, when we say this, no one likes to hear it, but it was better back then. There was a closeness that isn't here anymore. When families get together and everyone's face is buried into their phone, or they're messaging all the time. We would gather around after dinner and sing songs. We performed for each other. My brother and I, at my maternal grandmother's house, there was a school for the blind close by. And we would sit on the curb during the day and watch as the teachers would bring the students by, teaching them how to walk with the cane. I think back on it now and think what wonderful people they were. They were also like these kind of ghosts that were passing by us. Those days are gone, right? But they live in my heart, and I hope that your past memories live in your heart and in your soul. And I leave you with these words. When I was in high school in chorus, we used to sing a song. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Keep that in mind, my friends. The opportunity for peace and kindness always lies within you. I hope you have a happy and safe holiday season, and I look forward to speaking with you again. My friends, I hope that you enjoyed my memory of holidays past. It brought a warm feeling to me to talk about it once again and to listen to it. So much of what we do now gets lost in the hustle and bustle of life. And as I think about those trips to Little Rock and the holidays past, I urge you to look around and appreciate who and what you have in your life. And I hope that you have the merriest of holidays in this upcoming season. And I do want to thank you for being here all the way at the end of the podcast. One of the things that you listening all the way through does is that the platforms like Apple and Spotify and iHeart and Amazon and Pandora, when they see that more people are staying longer with a podcast, it encourages them to put it out in front of more people. It doesn't put a penny in my pocket, but it does help spread the podcast to a larger audience. I hope you can also just take a moment to hit that like, share, make a comment. If you could rate the podcast, that helps us too. I appreciate it. And if you go to Talesfromsouthflorida.com and you scroll down to the Contact Us portion and click on that green banner, I hope you'll also just take a moment to leave me a 90-second message of one of your memories of holidays in South Florida, or just a general South Florida memory. With your kind permission, I'll play it on a future episode. Until we take another talk down memory lane, my friends, as always, I remind you to be safe, be kind, and have a happy, happy holiday season.
Let's take a talk down memory lane, 'cause the stories around here are just insane. Pirates World, the Sporto and Wolfies too, Palm Beach to Key West, that's where we grew. These are the tales from South Florida for you, with your host Bill Monty.